What's happening, financial coaches? It's Pete here. Hey, I want to talk to you today about the confidentiality that you have in your client agreement. So, if you're bringing on clients, you're having them sign an agreement, you're probably saying, listen, everything that we talk about is entirely confidential. And generally, that's wrong. Generally, that should be wrong. And here are some exceptions that you need to think about when you put something like that in your contract. And I would be explicit about these things in your contract as well. Now, in most cases, it's good to be keep everything that you get from a client confidential. And in some cases, because you're not licensed, you're not certified, those types of things, in a licensed role, you are kind of bound by some of these things. FINRA has some regulations around it. And so you have to keep things confidential. In some cases, I can't acknowledge whether someone is a client or not. I can if they give me permission to, but certainly we don't release anyone's finances. Even advisors don't talk to other advisors about their clients or disclose them because it's on a need to know basis, right? And so if I'm not a advisor advising on your client, I don't need to know who that is, and you're not supposed to tell me. So anyway, the rules there are a little tighter and a little more strict. But even for us, even though we're not necessarily bound by those rules, as a financial coach, a lot of us will say these things kind of willy-nilly, like, oh, your information is kept completely confidential. Now, I don't mind in general the idea that you are going to be or you're going to honor their information by keeping their information, their finances confidential. I think people need that in order to work with you and trust that you are not going to put their information on the web or share it or use it in testimonials without their permission, those types of things. But there are some times when I think you're going to want to put in their contract, hey, I keep all of your information confidential. Anything you disclose to me in meetings is confidential. And there are some exceptions to this because I think it's in your best interest. And sometimes, depending on which certification you have, the AFC certification has some exceptions to these things that you have to know about. And if you are putting things into your contract that are prohibiting you from abiding by some ethical rules, I think you could be in some trouble. And you could be in some legal trouble if you disclose something that you need to, or you should, or you're legally required to, and yet you have an agreement with that client that says, I will never disclose anything. So a couple things that I would say. There's really two that I want to talk about. And one of them I'm going to break down into another video in a little bit more detail. But one, illegal activities. Now, this is one where I think when we talk about it, when I've talked to my coaches about this, I think we start getting a little like frantic and we start thinking about, well, what if they say this and who do I call about this and where do I report this? And generally, you're not going to have this issue. And generally with illegal activities, I don't have a big issue. And I will also say this, I have never reported a client of mine ever, but I have heard about illegal activities. You might say, Pete, well, don't you have an ethical dilemma about that? Listen, I am privy to a lot of illegal activities. I have been in cars where people have been speeding or turned a corner without using their blinker or checked their cell phone messages while driving or whatever it might be. I don't feel an obligation that anytime I see something that is not to the letter of the law, that I have to report it to an authority. I am not blessed with the authority or the capabilities of a police officer, law enforcement officer. And so you should keep that in mind, because I think a lot of this is going to deal with kind of your own comfort levels, right? So I have heard about people not paying their taxes. Listen, I have used my duty to warn cap at those times and said, listen, this is not something that you can just skirt forever. These are things that when you get a court appearance and a ruling against you, you go to jail. It's not just, hey, this is a fine that continues to accumulate interest or something like that, right? So I've told people about certain things that I think that they need to know, but I don't find it necessary for me to go out and report everything. Now, I bring this up because if you do get information about illegal activity that should be reported, that meets a threshold in your mind, maybe they are abusing someone in their household, maybe they are, who knows? But, if I found out someone was trafficking children for money or running drugs or, ripping people off or, running a fraudulent organization or embezzling money, these are things that I would report. And so for me, in my client agreement, I have a thing that says, listen, I keep your information confidential. I don't use your name, likeness, information in research or testimonials without your permission. And even in research, I anonymize it. So I aggregate some of this and I remove all PII and all those types of things. But I do reserve the right to break confidentiality if you tell me or I have learned about something that is illegal. right? Or something that puts people in danger. So if I find out that you are planning on murdering someone, or that you are going to get your money back by breaking someone's legs or something like that, one, I'm going to probably talk to you about it in our coaching session. But secondly, I will take those types of things to the authorities if I need to. Like I said, it's never happened. So it's always one of these things that we start thinking about some of these things, our mind starts going a little crazy. We get really creative in our minds. And I've never had that situation happen to me. But the reality is, some people do some crazy things, and money can make people do crazy things. And I think you need to have an out so that if you do the right thing, they don't actually have a case against you that, hey, yes, I was trafficking humans, and yet this person wrote in my contract that they would never disclose anything that we talked about in those sessions. And so even though you did the right thing and that person was prosecuted and went to jail, they could have some recourse to come back and get you. So anyway, that's just something I thought. It's a theoretical, because I've never had that issue. Like I said, because I specifically exclude illegal activities. The second one is suicide. And I'm going to suicide, or maybe even harm to oneself. But I'm going to dive into this one a little bit deeper, because we did a full training on it, and I don't know that it needs to be dissected too greatly here. But I thought I'd give you some framework around it, maybe some ideas of how to handle it if you come across it. Now, I will tell you that I've been doing financial coaching since 2010, 2011, and I have never come across a real suicide risk. And that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm the greatest reader of people, and maybe there were, and I just didn't know about it. But I don't think so. I don't even feel like we even got that close. I have had plenty of people who are very emotional about their finances, very emotional about a bad situation they were in, for sure, really. But I have never had anyone that came close to me thinking that they were suicidal or even going to harm themselves in some way, right? So listen, but I think this is one of those places where, if you say, listen, everything we talk about is going to be confidential, you don't have the power, theoretically, to reach out to the police or to a loved one or a family member or a friend or something for this person. I mean, there are going to be times if you think that someone is really in danger, maybe a danger to themselves, maybe a danger to someone else, whatever the terminology is, that you should reach out to the emergency response center in their area, or call an emergency contact or a loved one, or find their friend on Facebook, right? Or find their family member through an internet search and get in touch with them. And you will be breaking confidentiality at that point, saying, listen, I work with this person, and they keep talking about hurting themselves, and listen, I would really appreciate it if you would do a well-being check on them. I think they need some help. This is really out of my realm of expertise. I don't know if you know them or if this is something that's common. A lot of people, there's a lot of mental health issues, and a lot of those you are not in a place where you can diagnose or even offer the appropriate type of support. There's a lot of little nuance for people, depending on what they're suffering from. Some terminology can work really well with some people, and some can trigger some really bad behaviors, right? This is not our place to try to play psychologist or psychiatrist. This is a place where we just need to hand off, and you have to be allowed to reach out to an expert. And that may be the fire department in their area, right? So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Hopefully give you some procedures in another video. If you really think that someone is a suicide risk or present a health risk themselves, how to handle that. But hopefully it never happens. It's never happened to me. It's never happened to anyone that I've worked with or that has worked for me. So I think it's a really rare case. But I think it's one of those things that you need to have in your contract: illegal activities and as health risks to themselves or to other people, that you can break that confidentiality and reach out and not put yourself in any trouble, get yourself in any trouble either. So that's it. I'll talk to you later.